Welcome to the Food Junkies podcast. My name is Dr. Vera Tarman, and I am your host today, speaking with a carnivore dietitian who lives the sugar-free life, Dr. Sarah Zaldivar. Sarah got her master's degree in nutrition and dietetics and her doctorate in exercise physiology and nutrition from the University of Miami. She is currently a nutritional professor at Miami-Dade College and a full-time content creator at YouTube, Instagram, and other platforms. She is also a certified personal trainer and certified exercise physiologist with the American College of Sports Medicine. Every month, she selects a few individuals to coach diet, exercise, and mindset programs. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Vera, for having me.
Yes, good, excellent. So I'm really looking forward to asking you all sorts of questions about the carnivore diet and also your place in the world, because it's not widely acceptable except in a small niche of people. But if you don't mind, let's start with the personal story, how you got into nutrition and dietetics, and then how you landed on the carnivore platform.
Ooh, okay. I've always struggled with weight issues ever since I was 12, and a classmate of mine casually mentioned that, oh, I was fat. So I was traumatized from a very young age. And that's what led me to a lot of binge eating behaviors, restrict binge cycles, and it culminated at the age of 18 of me gaining a lot of weight. I reached a little over 60 kilos. I don't know the conversion of pounds because back then I was still living in Lebanon, and so we had the metric system. And then that pushed me to explore becoming a dietitian, because in my 17, 18-year-old brain, it's like, there's no dietitian that's overweight, right? And of course, my professor, who I absolutely love and adore, the first day of class, she wasn't like very overweight. You know, if you want to use the technical scientific term, you would say it is obesity class 1, 2, maybe. So, so that very quickly bursted my bubble. Bursted, I don't know if that's a word, a burst my bubble. And but I stayed in the program. I became a dietitian, and did my master's in nutrition and dietetics, and all that kind of stuff. However, throughout the whole journey, I would try to follow what they're telling us, eat all the carbs, and that definitely did not work. And I was having acne. And the reason why eventually I started breaking away from the mainstream advice and starting losing faith in authority figures and official dietary guidelines, or any kind of official guideline really, is because I did everything under the sun for my acne and nothing worked. Accutane twice, spironolactone for 2 years, birth control pills, antibiotics, everything, lotions, everything. And that's when I started doing my own research. And the first break from the mainstream was when I read Dr. Lauren Cordain's book, The Acne Cure. And it was all about the paleo diet and how hunter-gatherer societies really, and I'm not so sure if we really were gatherer societies. I think we were mostly hunters, but let's just say hunter-gatherer societies. Yeah. Did not have any acne, even their teenagers. When you have the highest levels of insulin, you also never saw acne in them. And I don't think he ever mentions the word paleo in that book, but it was all about eliminating grains, beans, and dairy. And guess what? Within 1 month, my skin was clear, something that all the other drugs I mentioned were never able to do. And so that was my first break, and I understood, okay, so paleo is the way to go. But I was still doing a lot of fruits, so actually my skin didn't really clear up as much as until I did carnivore eventually, and I realized like all that fruit wasn't helpful. And then from there, I started having a lot of anxiety when I moved from Lebanon to Miami, the University of Miami. As a doctoral student, they put you right into like, you start teaching, 20-year-olds, 23-year-olds. And I had even older kids. And I mean, I was 25 when I started teaching. So I had a lot of anxiety, and I started Googling diets for that. And Dr. David Perlmutter's website shows up and talks about how important eating a high-fat diet is for your brain health and removing carbs. And so I did that, and then within literally 7 days, it was like a flip switched on in my brain. Like like I didn't even realize I had brain fog until it went away.
Hmm.
So that's when I started realizing, wait, keto is like, I feel amazing on this thing. Like you get hooked very quickly once you feel it, the positive effects. And so yeah, I started doing keto, and then I realized it's also beneficial for body composition. And then eventually found carnivore because I was still having a massive sugar addiction. Like you do keto, but you also do keto treats. You don't understand that sugar,
Exactly.
the sweet taste, right, is far more addictive than heroin. I mean, it just blows my mind when I read those studies and when I share those studies with my clients and everybody. It's wow. So that's when every time I would have a binge or something like that, I would be educating myself. But like after every binge, I felt like I had to do something so that I would feel less miserable afterwards. So I would go purchase books, listen to interviews, podcasts, and this is how I discovered Dr. Sean Baker on Joe Rogan, Michaela Peterson, Jordan Peterson, a lot of Joe Rogans podcasts, I would have to say. And then I bought the book by Dr. Stephen Gundry, the plant paradox, talking about lectins and the plant self-defense chemicals, and how, I mean, throughout decades of academic work and experience in nutrition and exercise physiology, not once did anybody ever mention any downside to eating plants.
Mm-hmm.
And then here is this highly referenced book by Dr. Stephen Gundry, the sheer amount of studies that have been done on toxicology of plants. It's like, why aren't we taught this stuff? Like, at least mention it,
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing, right?
Yeah. Let me just stop you there for a second, because I want to back up on some of the things that you've said. So you mentioned that you were 60 kilos, which I think is around 140 pounds, something like that. Something like that. And I mean, nobody can see you, but
132 pounds.
Oh, okay. All right. Anyway, your weight is perfect, and I don't see a spot of acne on your face. So just for people who can't see you, it definitely what you're saying, you have sort of that issue for sure. Okay.
Thank you.
So when you did the study, I would imagine that, and there you were discovering you had a sugar addiction. You were also in the dietetic world, which is very much focused on eating disorders. When the term sugar addiction doesn't exist in that world. So how did you break free from that mindset, along with everything else that they were teaching you, to actually use that term food addiction?
You know about the Milgram experiment, how 80% of people will follow authority and follow orders no matter what, even if it's very clearly the wrong thing to do and against their values? People should look it up. It's wild when you see how people can be driven and just can become followers so easily, can be manipulated so easily. So
Lisa, just for people who don't know, that's the experiment where people were asked to zap people to pain just because they felt that they were told to by authority. It's
exactly.
a very well-known study, I think in the 70s, something like that.
Yeah,
Wow.
I'm not sure. Yeah, sometime around that. And they kept increasing the dose of the electrocution to the point where, had those electric shocks been real, the people would have died.
Right. And so you're making an equivalency with what we're teaching our patients.
Exactly. So I've always known there was something different about me growing up. I've always been critical and didn't follow authority or believe it blindly. From as long as I can remember. So I think maybe that was why, when obviously the experiences also that I've gone through, all those things together made me see the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics for what it really is. Literally just being in bed with the food companies, working hand in hand, investing in those food companies that keep creating more and more addictive versions of their processed foods.
And can I jump in? And negating the research, like about vegetables that you were just talking about, or plant-based.
Right. It took me a long time to get all the pieces together, but I think that final nail in the coffin was understanding the history of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, how it was started by the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Literally, this lady, Ellen G. White, claimed to have visions from God, and everybody believed her and followed what she said. And one of the things she proposed was that a vegetarian diet is the way to go, and it's the best, because really the reality was that she didn't want to see animals being hurt. I can obviously empathize with that, right? But now we know that actually a plant-based diet kills 25 times more sentient or emotion-feeling animals in a much more brutal way than...
And that's in that Plant Paradox book. People, you've got to read that book. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Yes. Isn't it wild that he still recommends those plants?
Yeah.
It's like, I need to have a little chat with Dr. Gundry. So anyway, so understanding all of those things made me lose all respect for the Academy of Nutrition Dietetics. As it stands right now, knowing everything we know with regards to the addiction research coming out, it is criminal what the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics is doing. Why are they silent on all of this addictive research? Why are they still working with those companies? You go to the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics conference every year. It's like a showcase for all the junk food and sugar companies. Not only that, they actually come up and present to the registered dietitians to give them continuing education credits. Really? Representatives for those food companies are providing the continuing education credits to our registered dietitians? I mean, wow. I've never heard of somebody going to a registered dietitian and finally having real success, really losing the weight and maintain. I've never heard of anybody.
So given that it's the wrong advice, how are you able to survive working in that field and in fact teaching in that field?
I think Miami-Dade College don't know. They let me do it. And honestly, I really should quit. I mean, my income is thankfully finally is like catapulted itself in the past, I would say half a year, to the point where I just make way more with my coaching business and my YouTube and my brand. What can they do? I'm not an employee. If I were to go and become an employee at a hospital, then it's gonna be a problem, right? But obviously I would never do that,
What about your teaching? Do you actually talk about the stuff that we're talking about right now?
Oh yeah, that's the only reason I'm hanging in there for a few more weeks. If it weren't for that, I would definitely not be there. Yeah, I recorded the basic nutrition. I mean, obviously basics are basics. You have carbs, proteins, fats, vitamins, there are some basics that don't change. Fine. I've recorded those lectures. They watch them over the weekend. And then when we meet a couple of days a week, all we do is Q&A and discussion. And so it's all about, and I give them a lot of homework. So they have to watch documentaries on the carnivore diet. They have to watch a lot of, because it's just so opposite to what the mainstream is, that so that they don't think I'm crazy. They have to be educated. And so there are certain really important pieces of the puzzle. The history of the American Heart Association and how Procter and Gamble literally put them on the map by giving them millions of dollars to start promoting their seed oils, right? And the history of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, how it was co-founded by one of those early Seventh-day Adventist adherents, who was just brainwashed to believe that a vegetarian diet is going to get you closer to God because it's going to prevent you from masturbating. And it's true, because plant foods suppress your sex hormones, so libido's gone. So yeah, you're not going to masturbate, right? So understanding those things, understanding that we are a hyper-carnivore species that derived way over 70% of our calories from pure animal meat. All those things they need to understand. So they watch those. And so when we get together, we talk about them and everybody gets excited and they start trying a carnivore diet and start getting the success stories, and the psoriasis is gone and they're losing weight and they're not depressed and they don't have anxiety anymore. So it's amazing. Yeah.
Okay. But so before we close off that part, so are you out as a carnivore in your institution?
The pandemic hit, we right away transitioned to online teaching. And then So I started teaching online around 2020, and that's when we also left Miami, bought a house in Ocala. So I've been teaching online
Yeah.
ever since, and so I don't see anybody in the
Okay.
department, right? And they never, and they're just happy because I have the highest ratings on Rate My Professors. Like I get them the most amount of students compared to all the different campuses. They have tons of campuses in Miami-Dade College.
Yeah.
My class, the people are dying to get in. The wait list is always full.
So it sounds to me like you're going to leave that world behind, and you're essentially taking your teaching skills onto the YouTube and the social media platform.
That's
Yeah.
what I've been doing, and it's just getting better and better. We're growing, and the message is getting out there. We're impacting people, and I'm happy.
I was going to ask that a bit later, but why don't you tell us, what is your program? What is it that you envision yourself doing on the social media platform? And I know you're doing some work one-on-one with people. So just tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, I do one-on-one coaching. I also started doing group coaching a couple of months ago, which I'm very excited to grow that part of the brand as well, because I can impact just a lot more people in that 1 hour that I'm present. The goal is, I know that my method, where I have gotten with the results with my clients, this has the potential to become a billion-dollar fitness brand. So that is the goal, to get there as quickly as possible. I think any species that reverts back to its species appropriate diet is going to get, you know, much better skin health, body composition. Everything is going to get better. I'm actually transitioning my dog to a carnivore diet too right now. He's getting really old, and finally my finances are matching my ambitions. You know, not really, like my ambition is way higher, but you know what I mean. I can finally afford to do like an all meat, high quality diet for him. So yeah, a species specific diet is the best diet, and that is the only diet that has zero addiction potential.
Actually, I was going to get to that. Clearly you believe that human beings, our species specific diet is carnivore. So tell us a little bit about the research that you have on that. And then, yes, I would like to know if food addiction, if that is the ultimate solution for food addiction.
It is the ultimate solution, of course, because especially when you take out the dairy, because remember, dairy has casein in it, especially cheese, which turns into casomorphin, which activates our opioid receptors in our brain, right? So you remove dairy, all of a sudden there's no more addictive potential. There's no fruits or vegetables even, because if you remember, evolutionarily speaking, for 99.99% of our existence as a species here on Earth, we evolved during an ice age. Do we really have plants and vegetation? It's not like a tropical forest, right? During an ice age, there is no plant food. So we evolved hunting animals and subsisting on animal protein and animal fat, right? Even the fruits that we have nowadays, those are frankenfruits. They never even existed more than 300 years ago. It's only in the last 300 years ago that we've started hybridizing those seeds, so that now, instead of having what we used to have, which was like a crab apple, which was literally like 2 inches in diameter max, most of them were bitter or toxic, and they had only 4 grams of sugar. Now you have 25 grams of sugar in an apple, and you think, oh, this is healthy. It's like, you know, this never existed historically. Every single plant food you can think of on the planet, before you ingest it, I'm going to give you an exercise. Go to Google and search for the wild version of that plant food. Sweet potatoes. Potatoes were like this size, most of them bitter or toxic. And most plant foods are inedible. Even the ones that we're eating nowadays, broccoli, cauliflower, they've only been hybridized in the past, what, I think in the like 1700s, 1800s. They all are derivatives of the toxic mustard seed, mustard plant. There's a reason why it is illegal to sell mustard oil, because it's so toxic, so high in erucic acid, right? But yet we've hybridized it, and we've made the broccoli and cauliflower, and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, it's this healthy food. It's like, oh really? How come we survived, and actually we were far more resilient, we were taller, had bigger brains, thicker bones, no heart disease, no cancer, historically speaking, when we had zero broccoli and all the meats?
Can I just ask you a question? I have to admit, I'm a fan of cauliflower. So from what you've said, are you saying that one version of mustard is mustard gas, right? which was
Yeah.
something that was, used in World War II. And are you saying that cauliflower and broccoli come from the mustard seed, which is like a cousin of mustard gas? Are we talking the same language here?
I think mustard gas comes from the mustard plant. I'm not 1,000% sure,
Okay,
but I
I
think
just find
so.
that
It's
amazing.
right. Yeah, they all have rusic acid in them. It's highly toxic, even at low concentrations. They lead to cancers in rats, right? And so this is what you're eating, low dose of poison over a long period of time, Cauliflower. I used to do all the cauliflower rice. It's carb. At the end of the day, it's still carbs. It kind of mimics regular rice. You add some olive oil in it. Oh my gosh, it's so good, right? But if we really want to optimize, it's best to remove that. Bok choy, Brussels sprouts, all of those are derivative of the same plant that never existed. We created it, basically. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So you're saying that we are, but what about the fact that while those plants have evolved, so have our bodies evolved. And so is it fair to say that a carnivore diet that you're trying to mimic from I don't know what period of time you're talking about, but we're not those creatures anymore that relied on that. What do you say to that?
So evolution takes a long period of time, right? How does evolution work? And this is another wild thing that I've noticed. Students don't know how to describe evolution. Like 18, 19-year-olds, they no longer, if you ask them, how does evolution work? They don't know how to answer that question. This is something that's starting to really alarm me. But anyway, how does evolution work? Basically, the folks or the people that cannot handle, let's say, anything new in the environment, they either die off or they are so unhealthy they can't reproduce, and so their genes die off, right?
Yes.
And so it takes a very long time for the resilient people who are adaptable to their environment to pass on those adaptable genes to the progeny, right? So it takes a very long time for evolution to work its magic. If we look at the skeletons of humans, Homo sapiens, before the agricultural revolution, which happened 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, versus our skeletons afterwards, you can see a very sharp decline in our health, right? So before the agricultural revolution, we ate a carnivore diet. And then something happened. It seems that it was a mix of overhunting the animals plus the climate changing, all those things, like to the extinction of those woolly mammoths and large animals we used to hunt. All of a sudden, it was like, are we going to starve to death, or are we going to adapt and just make do with what we can? And this is what we did. We started eating plants. It was better than,
yeah, the agricultural revolution.
Exactly. It was better than starving to death. Okay. But what happened is that you can very clearly see in every pocket of the world where they made that transition from carnivore to plant-based, every single instance is like clockwork. The same thing happened. We got shorter. Our brain size started shrinking, even though our brain sizes were exponentially growing, especially after we started eating meat, it started growing. And then when we could learn to cook meat, it went up exponentially. And now all of a sudden, for the first time in history, it started shrinking back down again. And that led to our skulls shrinking back again. And so our jaws were smaller. And that, for the first time in history, we started seeing misalignment of the teeth. Because we didn't have enough space in our jaws for all the teeth to fit in. And our bones became brittle and more rickety. And so we paid a very heavy cost with our health. But we made that trade-off because it was better than going extinct as a species.
But you and I are in 2023 we've survived that. We're the survivors. So why can't we eat the carbs that we survived on? Why do we need to go back? This is just a devil's advocate question.
I love it. Yeah.
But why do we have to go back to that initial one, since we've obviously survived this change?
Because there's a difference between surviving and thriving. Right?
Good.
So do you want to survive? You can, just like my dog survived for 12, 13 years on kibble, but he would have, he was able to thrive had I given him a carnivore diet from the get-go, right? Same thing. It's up to you. You can choose to survive, or you can choose to thrive and live an extra 50 years, maybe. I don't know how much longer we can live when we go back to our species-specific diet,
Okay, now, so what about some of the questions? Well, first of all, actually, you were going to say something about food addiction. Is it possible, obviously, if we're not eating carbohydrates, which tend to be very addictive, that's out of the picture because that's plant-based, the carbs. But what about, you mentioned, if you think about a carnivore diet, I actually think about cheese as part of that, and you've knocked that one off. So
Yeah.
I'd be interested in, is a true carnivore diet like a non-dairy diet?
Yes, 1000%. A
Because
true
I thought
carnivore diet.
carnivore meant anything to do with the plant, including the dairy.
That's what most people think. Different people come up with different definitions, and sometimes it's like when you have a very popular carnivore influencer, and they say a carnivore diet also includes fruits and honey. Now,
Ah,
they've developed their definition of a carnivore. My
yeah.
definition of a carnivore diet is just meat, no coffee, no plain food, no dairy.
Wow. Not even coffee. Whoa.
Yeah,
You've got
not even.
my jaw open there. Okay, as I hold my coffee cup in my hand.
Oh,
Okay,
sorry.
so you mentioned there's the casein in cheese that's addictive. So a pure carnivore diet that you're proposing, is there anything addictive? Can meat be addictive?
No, impossible.
What about fats? People say that fats are addictive.
If you're not eating them with protein, like a stick of butter, pure
Yeah,
fat, yes, any kind of calorically dense food is addictive, but that never existed in nature. You have to
right,
process it,
right. It
right?
always came with the protein. Like, yeah.
Exactly. So it offsets that hit to your brain with regards to the concentration of the fat.
Oh, that's interesting. So,
Yeah.
so that's why a fat, like a stick of butter, can be addictive. But if you stick it with, well, actually, you couldn't because that comes from milk, which is dairy, right?
Yeah, preferably not, and I wouldn't recommend it. This is not to say that people aren't getting massive results while still having coffee, while still having some butter, even some cheese. All of these are leaps and bounds better than any form of carbohydrate you would have otherwise consumed, you know? So, yeah.
But I guess if you look at all of the diet options that are out there, carnivore would be the least food addiction, or the most food addiction friendly. Okay, so now what about some?
Excuse me, let me just mention one thing.
Yes.
It is, if you really want to fully enjoy complete food freedom and feel so empowered, like I could literally have a red velvet cupcake in the middle of my living room all day long, and I couldn't care less. I wouldn't flinch because I'm not having fruits, right? I am training hard. So I've regain that dopamine and D2 receptor loss that was damaged by years of severe sugar and carbohydrate addiction.
Hmm.
And because I'm eating also no dairy. So there's no addiction happening in my brain, which means when you don't eat any addictive food, you have zero craving and you have zero urges and zero temptations. It's such a powerful state of being that I feel like everybody has to at least experience it once in their lives.
So what about the person who says, but where am I going to get my dopamine? Is it like it's boring? I want to have food that makes me feel not addictive, but I don't know. What do you say to that? Or do you
I
get that pleasure with eating still?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. It's really enjoyable for me to eat a piece of steak. It's absolutely delicious. But the only reason I finally find it delicious is because
Mm,
I have no longer I haven't numbed my taste buds with a cookie or a cupcake or even rice the day before or the week before. Your palate changes and readjusts. And now all of a sudden, I cannot wait to dig into a ribeye or even a rotisserie chicken or a piece of salmon, you know, and you notice as you get better at this, even the leaner cuts of meat start tasting just as good. So even leaner ground turkey or leaner ground beef does the same thing. Whereas in the initial stages of getting over the addiction, you needed something really, really fatty to get some level of stimulation.
right. And how
Yeah.
long does that palate take to change?
So it takes around 10 days for all your taste buds to change, but it's not just the taste buds, it's actually the dopamine receptors. Once the more you heal the D2 receptors, the dopamine receptors, really that I have discovered is the biggest dictator of how much you're going to start enjoying real food. Not only that, I now enjoy cleaning. It's something that I never in a million years
Mm.
thought I would, you know. I enjoy like a little bit of social conversation with people, a walk in nature, like little things, movies that I would had to watch the craziest movie to feel something. And now it's like the little things start to feel, you start getting high off of little things every single moment of every day. It's literally like a superhuman state of being.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's because, and that's a big thing of what I do with my clients. It's empowering them. And the way we do that is by treating the root cause of their addiction. It's very basic physiology. What is the root cause of addiction? Not enough dopamine. Not enough dopamine and not enough D2 receptors or dopamine receptors, because you need the dopamine to connect
Yeah.
to the D2 receptor for you to actually feel high, energetic, happy, etc. So that it's very simple. We know what raises it. There are so many things that raise it, but the biggest, most efficient, most effective way that I have found, and the fastest way, is exercise. The more intense your workouts, so dose and duration, actually, dose and duration of your workouts track closely to the amount of dopamine and D2 receptors. And so when I start working with a client, I get them to go all in with the workouts so that very quickly they start repairing the damage. So literally day by day, you see a difference, because every day you do a workout, you wake up the next morning with higher dopamine levels and higher D2 receptors. And now that allows you to train even harder. So you wake up the day after with even higher dopamine and D2 receptors. So I can get them to have zero cravings in a very quick timeline compared to the 2 years that naturally you would have to wait, right, for the brain chemistry to restore itself if you just do abstinence.
I have to ask you, what's your oldest client? Because I can't imagine doing what you're saying myself. So
Oh, let me tell you about this thing. I have so many, actually, I tend to attract a lot more older women because I think the younger women still are trying their hardest to keep
yeah,
their addictions. It's not until they hit their 40s or 50s that they finally understand that until you tackle the addiction, you're going to continue to yo-yo, which is why it seems like generally it's skewed a little bit more to a middle age or above.
yeah.
The oldest client is in their 60s,
Hmm.
and they can all do it. And the beautiful thing is that when you remove the plant foods, all of a sudden you no longer have joint pain, because remember, plants have toxins, plant self-defense chemicals, they're inflammatory.
Yeah,
And so people think, oh, I'm getting older. It's like, no, it's that bowl of salad you just had.
yeah.
And
Okay.
it's wild how all of the joint pain goes away so quickly on a pure carnivore diet.
Okay, so now I'm gonna put on my doctor's hat, and there's a couple of questions that when I think carnivore that I can't get my head around. So one of them is cholesterol. So I know about HDL and LDL, the good cholesterol, the bad cholesterol, and that it's what we care more about is the triglycerides. But what happens? I do see that sometimes people's cholesterol, overall cholesterol, does go up on a carnivore diet. So why do we not need to worry about that?
Because 75% of people who have a heart attack have low to normal levels of LDL cholesterol, which the American Heart Association likes to slap the label on and say it's the bad cholesterol. They're wrong, right? And we know that 93% of those who have a heart attack have abnormalities in their blood sugar. So
Right.
is it the sugar or is it the fat that we're eating? I mean, I think it's very basic, physiology, that it's just wild to me that we're not teaching our medical doctors that. And it's the same thing because the American Medical Association falls prey to the influence of the industry, like the pharmaceutical industry, similar to how the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics has fallen prey to the influence of the food companies, right? And they provide the continuing medical education. So just like those food industries provide the continuing education credits to our dietitians, it's the same model. And
Well,
so,
okay.
yeah.
But do you see people, clients of yours come in and say, hey, since I've gone on carnivore, yes, my sugar is good, my insulin levels are good, but my cholesterol went up. Like, do you
Oh,
see
yeah.
that? And does is there an alarm bell there? Or do you think, no, it's fine because,
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's completely fine. So a third of the people who do either keto or carnivore, so once you take out the carbs and you put instead fat in there,
Yeah.
a third of the people will have elevation in their LDL cholesterol. Another third will stay the same. Another third will drop. So it's very variable.
Yeah.
It's not about the total number of LDL cholesterol. First of all, before you even, and that's the thing that doctors need to understand, because they're not being taught this information. When you get a client and their LDL cholesterol is elevated, the first instinct of the doctor, okay, let's just prescribe a statin. It's like, hold on a second. What you should do.
I'm supposed to do that. Yeah.
Right. What you're supposed to do in reality, if we were giving unbiased, objective education to our medical doctors, we should be teaching them that instead of doing that, you need to order an NMR or lipoprotein profile particle test, LPP test. Basically, it looks at the subfractions of the LDL, because you have different subtypes of LDL. You have the large fluffy ones, which we love. We have the intermediate density LDL, and we have the small dense LDL, VLDL. It is only the tiny ones, the small dense LDL, that if they're elevated, I'm still not freaking out, because it's not about them being elevated. It's only if they are elevated and they have high inflammation levels as measured by, let's say, a high sensitivity C-reactive protein test. So order the NMR test or the LPP test, and order also their HSCRP levels to see general inflammation.
Right.
And if you have elevated levels of both high inflammation and high levels of small dense LDL, then we need to look at what is causing the inflammation. Oftentimes, we just need to wait until they lose the weight and the inflammation goes away. That's pretty much it. Or like if they're smoking or drinking alcohol, you know, it's not this statin.
It's not the dietary. Yeah, it's not
targeting the cause.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so that's the cholesterol thing. What about fiber? That's another big one. We need the fiber.
We do not need fiber. Again, we evolved without fiber in our environment. Not only that, fiber causes constipation. It's just, if you look at the science, at the actual scientific experiments conducted on fiber, every single one of them, the authors always conclude was like, they're scratching their heads. It's like, why are our dietary guidelines still recommending fiber? The scientific evidence is very clear. You want to cure constipation, gas, bloating, and pain upon elimination? Put your client on a zero fiber diet. I mean, it's such strong evidence. We have randomized controlled trials. We have the highest level of quality evidence, gold standard type studies, which are very rare in nutrition, by the way. We have them with fiber, and they all show pretty much the exact same thing. So fiber promotes rather than relieves constipation. And if you really want to eliminate constipation, by the way, I grew up on a plant-based diet in Lebanon, Mediterranean diet, vegetables every day, rice and beans, and I was always constipated all my life until I finally discovered carnivore.
Okay, so if I can just ask you very bluntly then, how many times do you go, like in a day or in a week? Like
that's the beauty, and that's the beauty of it. Let me ask you a question. Which species do you think would have had a survival advantage? The one who pooped 6 times a day, or the one who pooped once every 4 days?
Oh my God.
Who would have been in a less vulnerable state?
Well, obviously the one that poops every day, but if you're telling me, I mean, this is heresy to medicine. We're taught if the person isn't going at least once every 3 days, that's bad news. That's bad news. They're going to have polyps. They're going to have all sorts of problems with their bowels. And you're saying that a normal carnivore diet is once every 4 days?
Yes, once every 3 days, 4 days. Yes,
and it's not a painful experience?
No, absolutely not. And that's the thing, because if it were painful, that means you have constipation, right?
Exactly.
So again, going back, and before we even look into the studies, because the studies are very clear, no fiber is better than with fiber. The randomized control trials. I'm not talking about epidemiological studies, which make up 99% of our nutritional data, which are inherently flawed because they're using an inherently flawed collection tool, which is the food frequency questionnaire, which, by the way, I used for my master's thesis as well. And so we can talk as much as we want about that. It is useless. So a species who would be crouched, squatting 6 times a day trying to poop, versus a species who would poop once very seamlessly, no pain, no bloating, none of that, once every 4 days. That species has a much stronger survival advantage over the other one that's basically wasting its minutes in a very vulnerable position. That's number one. Number two, we evolved in an environment where we literally had no plants, no fiber. We didn't eat that, right? And we were far more resilient. We were a stronger species. And now if we look at the people, I mean, every day I get clients who were like, yeah, I was trying to heal this thing. And everybody that has ever come to me was either vegan or vegetarian. They all try this first. I'm always the last resort. People can't wrap their heads around carnivore, right? You go first, the first thing you want to do when you want to improve a health condition or get healthy, you go to Google, right? And what does everybody tell you? Plants, fruits, and vegetables. And everybody tries that and they get worse, right? And then they come to me and within like 2 weeks, they reverse IBS, IBD, irritable bowel syndrome or disease, acne goes away, rheumatoid arthritis, all of those things, ulcerative colitis, everything goes away. And I have to say a disclaimer, I've had a carnivore pregnancy now. The lady I saw worked with me for 1 month to put her on a strict carnivore diet, and we made her lose the weight. We want to make sure she's in a low inflammatory state, lose any excess body fat. After spending 7 to 8 years in Canada, seeing every doctor in Canada, doing IVF rounds, nothing worked. Within 1 month on a carnivore diet, I get an email a few days ago. She just wanted to tell me she's 6 months pregnant.
It's a carnivore diet can make you more fertile, basically, is what you're saying.
So true. I generally, a lot of people come to me for weight loss, and now I keep seeing the fertility thing happening. I have 2 women that reversed, 3 women, other than the lady who got pregnant, 3 other women reversed their menopause. It's like 2 years, no period. The woman is in menopause. She comes to me just to lose weight. And he's like, you are not going to believe this. After a month or 2 of working together, 2 months, that lady that I'm thinking about, you're not going to believe this. I just got my period.
Wow.
So yeah, you got to be careful if you're going to start making babies. So if you don't want that, be careful.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what about the other big one, cancer? I always hear this thing, eat too much red meat, you're going to get cancer. The nitrates or whatever it is, that's it, just the red meat. So what's your comment on that?
Yeah. Do they know that celery has far more nitrates than any cut of meat?
No.
I mean, they literally, yeah. So like, and because people are so afraid of the nitrates, now the bacon companies are like rolling out, nitrate free on the label, but then you turn it around and then the ingredient list is like celery powder.
Right.
It's nitrate, it's the same thing. And so, yeah, what is the #1 thing that feeds cancer cells? What is the preferred fuel source of sugar? How can you actually detect the tumor? You look at their glucose metabolism, it lights up because it takes up all the glucose, right? All the sugar. This is why I've actually interviewed Dr. Thomas Seyfried. He's following up the work of Dr. Otto Warburg in the 40s, doing all the research on how you can literally reverse cancer on a ketogenic diet. He's only doing keto. I didn't want to like push too much because I was just so happy that he came on my YouTube channel, gave me the interview. But I would add, if he really wanted to maximize efficiency of his protocol, I would add removing all plant foods and all plant toxins as well to supercharge that. Pablo Kelly, everybody should look him up. He's worked with Thomas Seyfried, had glioblastoma, one of the, it's like down to a science. You last 2 years max with the glioblastoma. He's been going on for 7-8 years, just because he's doing this kind of a diet.
So basically what you're saying is you'd starve the cancer on a carnivore diet. And you don't
Not only do you starve the cancer, the other cells are thriving while the cancer is starving. This is the
right.
complete opposite of what traditional treatment does, right? Chemotherapy just destroys everything in your
Yes.
body. And so, yeah, you kill off the cancer, but you still die at a young age.
And you know, I was just going to say, that would mean you don't need to do intermittent fasting. Do you do intermittent fasting as part of your protocol?
Naturally, I just am not hungry, you
Okay,
know.
right.
You naturally, yeah, I wouldn't say force it. It's, I think when I first work with people, actually almost everybody has a serious sugar addiction, especially when they come to me.
Yeah.
I'm not telling at the beginning, I'm like, don't force yourself to fast. It's just force yourself to train hard, and that's gonna repair the dopamine and D2 receptors, and
Right.
then, yeah.
Okay. Now, can you still gain weight on a carnivore diet? Is that possible?
Oh yeah.
And why would,
Carnivore diet is not a weight loss diet. It is a weight normalization diet. There are so many people who have tried everything to put on body fat because they're very, very underweight. And the only thing that works is eating a carnivore diet. And the hypothesis is that because it repairs the damaged villi and repairs the integrity of your intestinal lining, and that leads to better absorption of nutrients. But that's a hypothesis. Nobody has actually bothered to study a carnivore diet. We're too busy doing the bidding for Kellogg's and all of those food companies, because they are spending 11 times more to fund basic nutritional science compared to our government or the NIH.
okay. So you can gain weight, but can I assume that you can gain weight, but there's no overweight carnivore eater, or is there? Is that
Well, if you're doing a version of carnivore with sticks of butter and cheese, yeah, of course you're going to gain weight, right? But
okay?
that for me is not carnivore. Yeah.
Okay. Now, another piece about food addiction that we see, not explainable, but it seems to be a clinical piece, is volume addiction. Do you ever see people eating like too much steak, too much butter, too much, whatever it is? It's carnivore, but it's too much.
Absolutely. Totally happens all the time. And that's the thing. As much as I'm happy that people are following carnivore diet, I think the next frontier is tackling sugar addiction, because while I think carnivore diet, we don't have real data, so I can't tell you this with confidence, but I would assume that on a carnivore diet, people tend to have more benefit because it just removes so many of the cravings, so they can stick with it. But still, a lot of them, they'll do 2-3 months and then they fall off the wagon, and they're off the wagon for a while. So the sugar addiction is treated in a very specific way, and you and I know that, right? There is very specific things you got to do with addiction. And just saying I'm going to go carnivore, completely not paying attention to the fact that you have a seriously damaged dopamine and D2 receptor system,
Yeah.
that doesn't bode for the future. And you still have pretty much like high failure rates on it.
Well, so do you see people come in and say, well, okay, I'm just going to eat steak and meat, but they eat too much of it. Like, what do you do with them? Because they want
Yeah,
that feeling of volume.
I put them on a treadmill and I raise their dopamine and D2 receptor. And once that goes back up to normal,
I
they
see.
will naturally not care for this hit of they get, from the stretch receptors. Yeah.
Okay. So if you don't mind, can you give me a typical day in the life of a carnivore meal plan? Like how many ounces of protein? You know, normally I think, well, maybe 4 ounces of protein per 3 meals a day. But now if you're not having veggies, does that translate to 8 ounces of protein a day, or like per meal? Or give me a couple of typical days of what you would consider good.
The beauty of repairing dopamine and D2 receptors with whichever way, maybe you can do it in cold plunges, maybe you can do it with weight training. Maybe, you know, I think the best way to repair it very quickly is weight training plus running, and progressively increasing the intensity of that, because that's going to be equal to how much dopamine you're building every day, right? So the beauty of repairing your dopamine is that you all of a sudden, if you have extra fat cells on your frame, all of a sudden you're not hungry. Like you'll eat one meal and it's like, that's it. Like you have zero hunger, and that's the beauty of it. And then as you lose all the weight, all of a sudden now, because your leptin system also gets regulated, as you lose all the weight, your body's not going to let you become underweight. So it raises your hunger. And so once we basically get to a point where you have abs, you will naturally want to eat a little bit more just to maintain. And this is what happens every single time. But the trick is repairing the root cause, which is repairing the dopamine system in the brain. That's it. That's the magical cure. It's just that people don't want to hear it because it can be painful. Because I'm not talking about having fun on the treadmill. La, la, la. It's like, no, it's like, I want to die right now. That's the intensity I'm talking about.
Okay, but give me a typical meal,
Yeah, it's usually, so most people end up if they're on maintenance, most people, and if they're not working out, they end up with 1 to 2 pounds of ground beef a day.
Okay, a day.
That seems to be the consensus, a day. That's raw, by the way, raw weight.
Oh, right.
So
okay.
So like 1 pound raw meat for lunch, 1 pound raw meat for dinner. You cook it, you're good. That's it. I do eggs and bacon in the morning. I get the low sodium bacon that specifically doesn't have added sugar on the ingredient list. And then I'll do usually 1 steak. If I'm training especially hard, I could add a couple of eggs to that steak. Or some days I'll do nothing but steak. I won't, because a lot of times I'm not hungry in the morning. So I'll just have 1 ribeye in the morning, 1 ribeye at night. It changes a lot. Sometimes
you're talking like a 6 ounce or an 8 ounce ribeye per meal?
I'm talking more like 9 or 10 ounces ribeye.
Wow.
Per meal.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. That's all I'm eating, right?
Yeah.
And so, and a lot of days I'll just have one ribeye that is like 12 ounces cooked ribeye meat.
Yeah.
And that'll be 1 meal of the day, and I'm good for the whole day, you know. But because I train hard, and recently I've started really increasing my intensity more, I find that I need 2 meals.
Okay. Wow. And just, I know we're not calorie counting, but what would the calorie count of something like that look like?
No, I count. I make all my clients count. I think when you come from a background of having issues with food, you cannot trust your instincts until I repair all the dopamine in your brain and you lose all the weight and there's no inflammation. Now, okay, we no longer need to count. But it depends. It really depends. Are we in maintenance? Like, do we want to lose weight? So the calories adjust. I usually start off my clients with a 700 calorie deficit from the get-go. And I think that's another important thing. I think it really helps to drop the body fat, because every extra fat cell on your frame is inflammatory. It's pumping out inflammatory molecule, interferon, or interleukin-6, right? And that messes with your dopamine function. That messes with every single physiological system in your body. As you drop the weight, this is how I get people to get pregnant. You know, it's not, you know, and you repair the addiction faster that way.
So if it's a maintenance calorie count, then a maintenance, what would that be, like 1,200 or 1,800 or?
Because all of my clients, I make sure they're training hard. They rarely go below 1,700 calories because they're training hard, and that's also with a caloric deficit. So they don't eat less than 1,700 calories, and on top of that, they're actually burning 1,700 calorie deficit per day because we're putting them on a weight loss diet.
Yes,
most of them. I've had a few here and there that wanted to gain weight, which, by the way, we were able to do that very easily as well on Carnivore. I create YouTube videos about anything that I am interested in at the moment. And because I'm a science geek, I tend to create a lot about what I eat, which is a carnivore diet. My hubby is also on a carnivore diet. I create a lot of things like that, but I also create lifestyle, fashion, beauty, but they're very maybe right at the moment, it's probably out of the 402 YouTube videos I have, it's probably like 10 lifestyle videos so far. Okay. For me, it is about following my passions and being my own boss and, you know, creating the reality that I want to live in. It's not about, oh, I'm a carnivore doctor and I will only, you know, create things about it. Because honestly, a lot of the work with my clients extends far beyond their diet. It's about, what are your limiting beliefs? Why aren't you following your dream, your passion? Because if you have those things, I don't care how many great diets I give you, you're not listening to your gut. You're not, like, this is the best way to get dopamine. Follow your dreams. And it's just the limiting beliefs that we have. And so I'm more of a therapist than I am a dietitian, you know?
Yeah. Okay, so if I were to ask you what's next for you, I think you've just described it. Yeah?
Yes. Oh, I rap, by the way.
Oh,
Oh
wow.
yeah. Yeah. We're gonna start. I've put out a few songs, but I haven't filmed a professional, music video yet. So within the next month or two, you're gonna start seeing really high quality music videos, professionally recorded rap songs, on a consistent basis, also on my YouTube channel, in addition to the coaching business, because again, I want my coaching business to run itself.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've climbed the top of this mountain, and I want another challenge. And it's really my dream to be a performer. I'm a natural born performer.
If I can ask you, please do a rap on food addiction, and then I will happily post that everywhere. One last question. It's our signature question that we ask everybody in closing. If you could tell a younger version of yourself something about sugar addiction, or maybe carnivore diet, what would it be? A younger version of yourself.
It's like, you're swimming uphill if you're continuously dabbling in a drug that is far more addictive than heroin. It'll never, you'll never be able to moderate. I mean, yes, maybe, but after an intense rehab program, right? And even then, you will still have to, after you consume that addictive food, you will still have to have some cravings for a few days or a few weeks after. So like, why even go there? That's probably the thing that I wish I knew back when I was in my 20s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Sarah. That was a fascinating conversation. I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. I had a blast. And thank you also for coming over to my channel. We filmed that and it went live and people are loving it. So yeah, I definitely hope we can collaborate on a lot more in the future.